We do have Jason Murphy with us today. Jason has worked with very large MSPs in the past and smaller boutique ones. He was an SC before. I had the luck of having him come back to work with us on the Central automation team. So welcome, Jason. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
All right. And very rapidly, I'm Marc-Andre at Automation Nerd. My role is to really help you guys with anything I can, from efficiency, deployment, best practice, whatever, you name it. My Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, that is the best way to reach me. If you have any question, please do so. And I will be able to help you guys however I can. The Success Center is always your best place to get started for any help whatsoever. I always mention it in almost every webinar I give because there's still people that don't know about the Automation Cookbook, don't know about the Institute, don't know about the forums, the ideas page where you can submit feature requests and things like that. So these are all contained within the Success Center. So if you want to get help, go there, log in. If you don't have a login for it, that's fine. Ask your manager. If you are the manager, open a support ticket and get help. They will help you. They will help you getting access to the Success Center. This is really where you want to go for all the ongoing stuff that we work on. So what are the office hours? When we started this program a year and a half, almost two now ago, we wanted them to be topical. So we made them for operational matters. We made it for sales and marketing. We made different ones. This is the automation and efficiency one. So we're going to go over anything around automation, the central product in general, monitoring, best practices, things like that. It is meant to give you a chance to engage with industry experts, with very humbly like myself, Jason. And also, a lot of you guys will give us a lot of good answers as we answer the questions and alternatives. So that's always welcome as well. The office hours are meant to help foster an online community. We've seen a shift in the last few years from MSPs being very protective of all their IP, their knowledge and everything, to starting to share back with the community on social media, with the different events that we do, with the different webinars like this. So we really want to continue pushing that forward and helping you guys share and be more open with each other. We also want to help you guys grow your business. We want to give you guys tips, tricks, and different things like that. And it's always a good way also for us to get feedback and suggestions. I take a lot of notes from these that we then discuss with the product team, the dev teams, whether it's issues, bugs, suggestion, changes, little tweaks. It's always nice to see what you guys have to suggest to us. So this is really just another way to get some help. So there's a lot of resources. I talked about some of them, but if you don't know some of them, take a screenshot right now. Or Jason, if you want to put some of these links in the chat, that would be fantastic. The Automation Cookbook is the first place. We are now well over 500 automation and monitoring out there, some for Windows, some for Mac, a variety of different things. You have the Success Center forums where we get more and more people posting, asking for help, and they are moderated by our team, by Jason, myself, by different people, and a lot of partners also give a lot of answers there. So that's a great place to go and get help. You have the office hour, which is this webinar, so you guys are on that, so fantastic. And then we have the Institute training, so you can go into the Success Center, log in, go to the Institute. There's a ton of different courses around business, automation, things like that. This is all the new stuff for the last month in the cookbook. So if you go to enable.com/cookbook, you can basically see all of these have been added in the last month. So if you want to enable file and print sharing, if you want to uninstall ESET, locking the screen when the user is inactive, removing Microsoft Edge if you need to do so, and so on. There is a ton of automation, and we're going to keep adding more and more. We have recently brought on board Charles, which is our Mac nerd. So we're going to start seeing more and more Mac scripting and Mac automation, which is fantastic, as well as a lot of Mac training and different resources. But this is our first month adding a lot of Mac content. So there's about 9 or 10 new Mac scripts around getting different data points, enabling the firewall, installing the latest .NET version, and so on. And we're going to keep posting more and more. So those are in the cookbook. You can grab them. There's no cost. They're just different scripts. You can click, download, use, and that's fantastic. The last column is a few new ones that we added: monitoring for competitor RMM agents. That's very useful. We found that one and reused it so that you can monitor if your customers' machines have competitive platforms, which could be a risk as far as a bad actor installing stuff. It could be a competitive platform going in play. Could be a variety of reasons. So it's good to monitor that. So it's available now. and deploying threat locker, which is getting used by more and more. That was built by Don Brown from Brown Cow Technologies. So he shared that script with us. We put it in the cookbook. So that was about 19 about 19 this month that we added in August. So we're going to continue. My goal is to do at least 10. So if you guys have scripts you would like to share, there's an upload button. Feel free to do so. And we review them, we put them into the cookbook, and we always curate the list to make sure everything is good. So the first question, I hope this makes sense. Not enough coffee yet. That's fair. Is there a way to have Automation Manager wait until a certain event is triggered? I know there's a wait you can input for seconds and things like that, but I need to wait until it triggers. So for example, you decrypt dict locker, wait for it to be done, and then say, then the drive is decrypted, and then do a process like re-encrypt it, right? Something like that. At the moment, there is not. The only way you could do this would be to do it through PowerShell. The caveat to that is that after an hour, Automation Manager will stop tracking the actions of that policy by default. It would still finish the policy. It will not kill the policy, but it will stop tracking it. So what you can do is, one way that I've done it before, is kind of cheating, but it works really well. I'm going to call it test here. And I use a cheat wait object type of deal. So what I would do is I'm going to say, how do I do it? Split string? No, yeah, it is. So the split string object basically takes a list and will generate an array or a list of some kind. So what I'm going to do is go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that. And then if I do it with a comma like that, basically when I run this, what I end up with is going to be, I said play. There you go. It gives me an actual usable list. What I can then do is loop through multiple times and then do different actions. I know it's not exactly what you're asking for, but I'm going to give you the best workaround I can for it. So what I'm going to do is do a global variable, go G done. The default would be false, I guess. So basically, I'm making a variable called am I done and saying no. So what I would then do is you would have to monitor that action over and over again. So what you would do is you would do for each like that. And then we're going to say for each item in the split string, we're going to say if, we're going to say if the global variable done is equal to false, then do whatever's in there, which in your case would be monitor, is it still decrypting, is it still doing this or that or whatever. Then from there, what you would do is say, okay, if it is done, so if whatever action is done, so we're going to just use the log object in this scenario, just kind of fake it. The log object is going to output, I'm not done, I think. And then I should have put if else. If else. And then if it is not done, indeed, what it would do is I'm going to say if the log message contains the word not, let's say, whatever. In this case would be the output of whatever your piece is. Then what you would do is say, okay, if it is not done, wait maybe a minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever you choose, right? So we'll put, let's say 5 minutes here. On the other side of this, if it is indeed done, what we're going to do is say set my global variable to say gdone is equal to true. So basically we're changing it. So what's going to happen here is like this, is that it's gonna basically start here, get my list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I could actually make this, 6, 7, 8, whatever, however long I want really, but I'm gonna put 7 in this case. It would loop through 7 times no matter what, but it's gonna say if it is not done, go through here, do whatever the monitoring action is it still decrypting, what is the size of BitLocker, things like that. Then if it is not done, wait, and then loop back over and check if it's done, right? Then if it is indeed done, it would set this to true. It would then loop back over itself. When it does, it's going to come back and say, am I equal to false? No, I am not. It's going to skip over this and then just do 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and then finish. And then the policy would be done. So what I'd be missing here is your monitoring action right here. And then basically whatever the action is here would be to decrypt the drive, I guess. But that would allow you to loop over yourself multiple times to do this. Actually, I could probably keep a copy of this because I keep showing that to different people, and I should probably put that in there. So loop set amount of times with monitoring, and then whatever. Okay. So in this case, yeah, you can run this. Once you're done, you output whatever action you want, and you can do this monitoring. An alternative to this, which I've seen also done, would be do it through monitoring, and then you monitor if that condition is done. So you do it through a policy that just says, is it done, is it done? When it is decrypted, run an action, re-encrypt the drive, for example. That way if somebody turns it off, it would re-encrypt it, but I know it's not what you're asking, so that's why I didn't go that route, but that is definitely an option there. Next question here from Brett. What is the best way to verify that patches are installed? We drew a line in July and we need to know if every system has the July update or sooner since they are cumulative. Jason, actually, did you want to answer that, being our patch expert here?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'd like to know more, obviously, like how did you draw a line for July patches? Like you just turned off the automatic update for it or what have you. But I guess what this really comes down to is how do we report on missing patches for your systems, right? And if Brett, if you could just kind of let me know like how you're doing it today, if you're going and doing it manually and then you just stopped or what have you. But typically one thing I always shy away from is patching by device, right? And the reason being is when you start patching devices where you're choosing some but not others, what happens is you start putting approvals into a mix mode. And that is really how N-central goes, oh, we've got some that are approved and some that are not. And then it puts it into a mix mode and makes it messy, right? Because you really don't know what is not approved and what is and what have you. So the way I like to do it is if I hit cancel. So I try to, just for reiteration here, I try to avoid patching by device at all cost. But what I typically do is when I'm trying to find out what's installed and kind of update kind of what is needed, I look to this. So yeah, so just go by patch, patch management. And then, and then from there, if you open up the ribbon to the right, so, and you'll see the option where it says status needed. If you go down in the middle, yep. And then if you were to choose your cumulative update, like if you were to check docs under update or what have you, this is what is outstanding, right? Now, you essentially want to know what devices are missing this. And that's where it gets tricky because from this view, you're unable to report on it. Or this is where you can approve it, and this is where you should approve it if you're doing so manually and not automatically, because there's a whole other interface for automatic patches, as you're well aware, Brett. But it's one of those things where I kind of do the fact finding here to see what can be approved and push it out this way, but use the device wizard to kind of show what devices have it and what devices don't. So I hope that makes sense. And obviously I wasn't sharing I was kind of showing my screen on my side, but Mark has kind of been able to kind of identify that. So I don't know if that helps or if it doesn't, but that really is the only kind of way in the UI to be able to do that. So hopefully that's enough for you.
Yeah, Brett is saying he's using the KB numbers to identify them, and he's doing a filter, and it's getting very slow because he has so many. That's a very fair point. One thing that you can also do is use automation and make a monitoring service, which would be an alternative. So are all the basic KBs installed, right? And granted, you have to make sure that all these machines need that, or some of them. Is KB installed? I think it's that one, is automatically installed. And then you can do whatever the KB numbers are, and you can put multiple of those and just run this every day on all the machines and output that somewhere, whichever ones are missing and things like that. And you can use a policy to do it for you. And you do it either as a monitoring that you run a couple times a day, or you do it as a policy that runs through a profile once or twice a day. You output that to a yes, no, or a no dash, here's what's missing type of filter. And then you could more easily manage that information. So Brett, that would be another very good option if you want to do it a little outside. And yeah, to your point, you would do a custom service. Yes, that's my preference with custom service. The only thing is doing something like that, obviously, if you run this every 5 minutes, first of all, that's not super useful. Second of all, that gets a little tedious. So what I would usually recommend is to, when you configure your service, your custom service, so if I go to custom service and do a new one based on automation, then I pick whatever policy. When you schedule it, you can actually change that, and I can say run it hourly, run it, however you want. So I could say run it at midnight every day, and then do it, midnight, maybe 8 a.m. and then 2 p.m. and so on. You do it a few times a day so that you hit if anybody's missing, something like that. All days, obviously, something like that. It would run 3-4 times a day, and it would not be as noticeable. Some lower end machines will start feeling if you do a lot of these automation services. So this is just a precaution, and then you would say, the service would be called am I somewhat up to date, right? Something, whatever you want to do. Then you would put all the different data points you want to output, and that would get you that information. So yeah, you could also do a custom property. Yes, the other way to do it would be to run it as a task profile, because profile will apply to new machines. A regular task would not. So you would say add a task profile and then check if it's up to date. Then you do a automation policy run. Once you do so, you would pick whatever your policy is, and then it would output, what is missing, is it up to date, and so on. You would output this to whatever custom property you would choose, and then that would be scheduled once again on a schedule of your choice, recurringly every 6 hours, let's say, right? And then it would just repeat that, or actually, hold on, wrong one. Custom, and then once again, do it where I would say do it at midnight, do it at 8 a.m. and so on. And you would do it a few times a day, and then you'd be good to go. And then you would filter in a custom property. So when you do your filter, if you're not super familiar with that, I know Brett, you would be, just because we know you. But for those that are not, you would go here, say device, custom property here, and I would pick whatever property I chose and say if it is equal to restricted or whatever the output is, and then you would find those devices. You would know those are not patched properly. You could put a patch now mechanism, say, hey, you're behind, catch up, things like that. A lot of partners that are very in tune with patching will keep up with the patches, what is behind, does it in the reboot. The biggest issue for all the workstations and laptops is always the darn reboot. People don't reboot, the patches are installed properly, and then you have problems for the next month. So by monitoring the uptime, forcing reboots after X amount of days, that takes care of a lot of these issues. But monitoring it this way is definitely a good way to really keep very close to what's happening. Next question I have is, Andrew, is there a way to trigger a script on resolution change? Maybe there's some monitor for a WMI setting change, things like that. The automation would need to execute fairly quickly. This is for a scenario where tablets get rotated and then the script fixes the resolution settings after an auto rotate. Honestly, at that level, there is not. The way the platform is built is that you would monitor something on a 5-minute, 1-minute interval, and then it would trigger a self-healing, which would take 20-30 seconds to get to run. But as far as running real time, there's not really anything that is built in. The only way would be to do it like a Windows task or a service that would be waiting for something. That's really the direction I would take with that one. So yeah, sadly, Andrew, I don't have a very good answer for that. I did see the question and I was kind of dreading it, but to be honest, if your tablet gets rotated, for example, you need to fix the resolution, something like that. I don't have a good answer. Most tablets or devices that run Windows, when you move them around and do stuff, they tend to self-adjust with hardware profiles. That's what they call them now. But if it doesn't, I would recommend looking into a specific app that would be running there as a service. There's a few that exist that will do changes based on the hardware settings, so it would force it if it doesn't do it properly. But yeah, that is the only way I can give you for that, sadly. Next question I have is from Cody. He's asking us if we can create a custom property based on the output of a policy. Well, you cannot create the property, but you can output to a property that exists. So what you would need to do, for example, if you want to store your BitLocker keys, you would create a custom property called BitLocker key, right? So you say add device level text in this case. And I would say call it BitLocker key, put a default of no key found, BitLocker key 2, whatever. Then you choose which device this would apply to. Now this would apply to Windows essentially. So what you could do is say workstations and laptops on Windows. That's usually where you would apply, but if you want to do it on servers too, why not? Like that. You choose the classes that it would apply to. If you don't have a dramatically large server deploy, and central deployment, like if you're below 2,000 to 5,000, it's usually not a big deal, just add everyone. But if you are on the larger side, it might be better to just pick the classes that make sense to you. Then you save. This pre-creates the custom property. It is there, it is usable. Then when you run your task, again, through profile or regular task, depending on what you're trying to do, you say add a policy. You can do it from about 5 different places, but from this place, it's the same thing. I would say get my BitLocker key, and then here's my key I want to output. Perfect. Output it to my BitLocker key 2, whatever I called it. And then every time the policy runs, which in this case should be recurring, it would output that BitLocker key directly to that custom property, and you would have that information available to you. Next one is from Greg. All right, he's saying, I often have difficulties assigning results to an output parameter. For example, if I run a get logged on user and I get logged on username GB, what is the easiest way to set an output parameter to GB? And it depends on the object, actually. You know what, let's just take a look at that, because I know where you're coming from having an issue, and I kind of know why. So what I'm going to do is, like, here, if I run this, the output is a string, right? You see that in the help on the side. That's super easy. We see that all the time. Now, if you take an object like get logged on user and like this, now this one will return a list of users. You can see here the type is collection. It is not a single row, it's a list of users. Because the thing is, multiple users could be logged on at the same time with a suspended session. You see that more on servers, but it could happen. So that is why this object will output a list and not a single row. And a lot of objects do that, like this one here. User that did not log on in the last X days, that is a collection again, it's not a string. So by having this as a string, you can do a few things to it. So if we clear that out and start, right? Actually, yeah, let's keep that for now. So if it's only one thing, super easy. I do, like, example, an if. And when you go to link it, it's going to offer you that object and those variables. Result is always a 0 or 1. That's a did it work, did it break. Result string is going to be some debug info. You don't need to care about that. And then conditional will actually be the answer or whatever the output is. So that is what you would link and do something with, right? But if I go and I move this object down and I say I want to link to my get logged on users, you'll see here that variable is not there because it's a list. So what you need to do is one of two things. You need to say use the collection contain. You can get a row count. Those two will do that. So I can say how many people are logged in. So I can say get logged on users list. That's going to give me a count. Or does that collection list, the variable will be username in my case, contain, let's say, Mark. And I can say exact or partial. I'm going to say partial in this case. And when I run this, now these objects are going to go through. If I can make this bigger, there you go. This is going to go through and say who is logged in. There's only one in my case. It's myself. Duh. Now it's saying here, this is my collection. Is there someone called Mark logged in? Yes, it's Mark A, Marc-Andre. So that makes sense. Yes. And then here, how many people are logged in? It's 1. Now you can use this output to do whatever you need to do because it told you somebody that matches this name is logged in. So in the case where you want to say, is there someone called administrator logged in? Because you don't want people to use administrator. You can actually get a pop-up and a warning about that as a custom service. That would be a way to do it, Greg. This one will just tell you how many people are logged in. On the case of a Citrix servers, this would be useful because you can say, okay, or a terminal server on RDS, you could get a warning if there's too many people logged in at the same time, which is usually an indication that either the server is under spec or you have a lot of disconnected sessions. Either or, this is something you may want to monitor. If your limit for licensing is 25 and you're at 20, this would warn you like, hey, you're at 20, you're at 80%, right? And that would get you that. Now, if you want to go through the list and do something based on that or concatenate it into something, you would then go with a for each. Now, if I'm going too quickly, let me know. I'm trying to not go super fast, but at the same time, it's a lot of things to kind of cover. So I'm kind of doing my best at the same time. So what you would do is the for each allows you to basically loop through each item in the list and do something. I'd say take my user list and say, actually what, we'll switch the local logged on user to local users. Yeah, like that. Just the reason I'm going to switch to this really, oh, it freaked out. Okay. The reason I switched to this really is on purpose. It's just so that, yeah, whatever, is so that this one will have multiple accounts on my machine because I keep doing stuff with it. So I'm gonna say get that list of users, and now if I want to concatenate it into a usable list, what I would then do is then if I want to output it to a custom service, for example, as a list, or if I want to loop through each and say like, hey, when you find this, do something like that, you can do it with a for each. And the way to loop through would be pretty simple at this point. If I do log and I put that here and I link that to my for each username, it's going to output each user found on my machine. And as you can see, it loops through each of them. So it said, here's a list of all the users on my machine. Then it says the first one is administrator, the second one is this, and it loops through each of them one at a time. And that is how this is really allowing me to go through each account to do an action of my choice. Now, if I would like to basically concatenate that into a big list, let's assume that's what I want to do, I would go to input, global variable. Global variables are reusable variables in the scope of automation that you can loop over yourself and do stuff with. So I'm gonna say add, and I'm going to say G for global, that's just my naming, and then users. That's a string, and then no users found. I always put a default value. That's a preference. It is just so that when you have an empty variable, let's say you don't find anything, it's not going to loop through, and when you output it, that's going to output nothing, and that is not ideal. So what I'm going to do is say for each, then put an if else. If my global variable users is equal to no users found. So it's basically my first user. I have an object called global variable assignment, and I'm going to put on each side of this. On the other side, I'm going to come back to that in a second. I'm going to put this object. All right. So here, if it is my first user, I want to overwrite that no users with my first one. So I'm going to say take my users list and take my for each username. So the first time around, it's going to erase that from the variable and replace it with this. The second time, I want to concatenate this. So I'm going to basically go like this, like that. And then I'm going to say concatenate these two things. The first thing will be my global variable, and the second one will be my for each username. So it's going to basically loop through and concatenate, and then it's going to save my global variable with that updated value. Now, if you've seen this in my bootcamp before, that is because this is one of the labs. This is one of the things that we cover. But I just figured I'd still cover it since that's a very good question. And then I would say do OK. And then this goes over itself like that. And basically now you can see it made a global variable with 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 accounts that are just concatenated with a dash. I could have put a semicolon, whatever, but that's how I chose to do it. And then finally, if you want to build that into a monitoring or reuse, you would do output, add, and then say out users, list of users found on that machine, and then list output from my, like that. And this now will allow me to get that list of users out as an output that I can then use in a custom service. I can say if that list contains so and so, or if it does not contain so and so, go into a failed state, and so on and so on. So that gives you that visibility. Now, I'm going to save that too, just because that's a good one to keep. Get local users and output. Yeah, I think I already have an example of that because I've done that before, but whatever. Next question from Kevin. How can you use a client custom property that contains a drop-down list inside of an automation policy? So you can use, even though if it's a drop-down, you can still use it as an input or output. If you're gonna send something to a custom property that is a drop-down, it should still let you, but what it's gonna do, and that is unless I'm mistaken, but I'm gonna verify here, device, yeah, that one. So if I run this policy and I say output to it, it should let me, unless I'm very confused, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. Yeah, it does. You can output to a drop down. The only thing is you need to make sure that that value maps to one of those drop down values. If it does not, it will refuse the output. Basically, if I say run this and then output the name, if the name is not one of my custom property values, so if I go to my custom properties and go into my patch, there's this one and this one. If my output does not match one of those, it will refuse and not send it. So that's important that you make sure that this balances. But the system will let you, and the exact same thing as an input, you can send a custom property of a drop-down type to it. The drop-down is essentially a text or a string variable, and it will map it as such. So that is how that would work. Hopefully that answered the question. It feels like it's a little bit of a short one, but hopefully that makes sense. Custom property is always a very confusing area for a lot of people, so I'm not surprised to see that there at all. Daniel is saying that he's looking for a script that would monitor failed login on computers. So get an alert, there's more than 5 failed logins within 60 seconds. If I'm not mistaken, the only way I'm aware of doing that would be through an event log monitor. Are you aware of anything else, Jason?
I've always just done it through event logs.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too.
Now there's some tools in Active Directory that you can use for on-premise domains and stuff, because things are a little more verbose than it is in just a Windows 10 machine. But
my way of thinking is pretty much the only way I can think of is to
I think the event ID is 4625, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it is. So what I would do, just in the interest of time, I would use usually an object, but just because I have a quick little one-liner script here, get failed login attempts. So what I would use into something like this, and if you're not familiar with it, we do have an object called run script, and that gives me the ability to run whatever command I want. In this case, we don't want to do for a specific like that. Now, the only thing missing here, and we've done that together on another example, Jason, for the login outside hours, would be to just put a filter on the time to say like the last minute, the last 2 minutes, and then say if there's more than X, then do something. So what you would do here is say event list is equal to this, for example, and then just say event list dot filter time blah 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 and so on, and that would give you exactly what you're asking for. I don't have it built, and I don't really want to build it end to end here, just because that's going to just bore everybody to death just building PowerShell. But Daniel, if you want to send me an email, it is something I wouldn't mind finishing and putting in the cookbook, because I think that'd be a good one to do if there is not anything already done, but I don't believe there is. There are third-party tools that you can use for this, but obviously I don't think you want to go and spend money or use some third-party out there to do it. So doing it through this script with very minor modification, I think would do exactly what you're asking for. Next question, just going back over that hotfix check from earlier from Brett. He's saying for the hotfix check, would it be an automation policy to check if the hotfix is installed? If installed, set global variable to true, repeat over and over and over again. Yeah, you could, absolutely. The easiest way, in my opinion, would be to do it as an input. Hotfix verification from list, like that. All right. And what you would do is I would make an input called in hotfixes, and then you would do KB 123, KB 1234, and so on, right? Like we just do a list of like 25 of those, like that. And then the display would be list of hotfixes that should be on that machine. Okay. So if we do that, I now have a list of a whole ton of KBs. Making it an input makes it customizable, makes it reusable. I tend to prefer that. And then I would say here as a global variable, G missing KBs, and then no missing KBs would be the default. That's important. And then, like we saw earlier, I would use a split string to split my input list with a comma. Then I'm going to say for each. Then I'm going to put an if else like this. Then I'm going to say, actually, I'm missing one more if. Yeah, okay. I'm missing an if, put that in there. Okay, let me do that, and then I'm going to explain what I'm doing, because it's hard to say at the same time, to be honest. Okay, so what I'm going to do is we're going to say, okay, take my list of KBs, make a list from here. And someone's asking as I do those, I always put G. G is for global because it's global variable. I tend to be very careful about naming. I'll put in for input. I'll put G for global just to make it easier. I don't want the names to overlap, and I also don't want to use a protected name in PowerShell and break a whole bunch of stuff. So I tend to just put prefixes to make my life easier in debugging and troubleshooting, and also when I use it. That's just for me. You don't have to, but I really, really recommend it. So then what we do is we have that list of strings that we're going to split. Then we see for each item in said list, is that KB installed? So we're going to say for each value right here. Now, if it is indeed not installed, so if is installed equal to false. So if it is missing that KB, let's say, I can then say if my global missing KBs is equal to no missing KB. So if it's the first one, just like we did before, I then global variable, format string. All right, like that. So what I would do is I would say global variable missing KBs and output the actual hotfix name that's missing, right? The next one, we then concatenate. So I'm gonna say take my global variable like we did earlier, take my new KB, then make a list out of it. So this and this, and then come here and say update that from my formatted string. So now what it's going to do, if I go back, I split my list of KBs that I have here. Then I say for each item in said list, are you installed? If you are not, then is that your first one? Yes, save it. If not, concatenate it. Then once you're finally done doing all of that, output that. So out missing KBs, missing KBs on that machine from our list. And you're gonna see I'm gonna do something a little different. That is my personal preference. You don't have to, but that is what I like to do, is when I get an alert, I like to have as much data as I can. So I'm gonna say it's missing these 5, but which one am I really looking for? I like to put as an output, so out KBs checked for list of KBs that we were looking for, and then link that to my input. So I'm basically taking the input and setting it back as an output. I'm not going to threshold on this. It's just so that when I get an alert, it's going to say, you're missing these 3, here's your list 25. And personally, that would make it easier for me if I had to troubleshoot this particular error. So it would just loop over itself, do this however many times, 1, 2, 5, 10, 20, then it would tell you as a custom service. If you have your list and you have to change it from time to time, it's easy. Go in your template, change the input, save, apply, boom, done. All right. Yeah, that's the thing, Brett. You can update it, right? And that is one thing. Every time I do boot camps, office hours, I talk to partners one-on-one, or I go to visit partners like I did recently for one of them in Jersey. I always advocate using inputs on custom services to make it customizable. You don't want to have to modify the policy. You don't want to have to revisit and recreate the wheel every time you want to modify. You just want to be able to change the inputs, save, reuse, boom, and I'm done. And that is by far what I would recommend. So yeah, I don't think that would be an issue to do multiple. The only thing is you may have to do different versions for different OSs, or you would have to add something in here to say, you know, if this one or this one and so on. So I would just kind of be wary there. But if you're doing it for like Windows 10 versus Windows 2016 and so on, I would just do 2 versions with their own list because the lists are vastly different. Just something to keep in mind. Next thing we have, let's see. Hey, Mark, we are mostly a Dell shop and we have issues a lot of older Dell laptops with their batteries. Do you know if there's any way to monitor if those batteries are getting towards the end of life? Ooh, actually, yeah. It's actually in the cookbook. Where's my cookbook? There it is. There we go. Battery capacity. There it is. I knew that. So I knew we had that somewhere. So what you would do is you would take this policy, this automation policy like that, and you would turn this into, no, I don't. And you would turn this into a, there it is. This one, it's a very simple, okay, not so simple, but it is a PowerShell script that will take a look at the battery age and overall health. So what it does, if I run this, I can see here what is the minimum capacity left. So battery, as it degrades, will go from 100% capacity or 102% in some cases, under provision. We tend to see that on higher end devices. When they start getting below their milliamp, they'll go 95%, 90, and so on, and they'll slowly degrade. So if I run this, this is a brand new laptop, so I'm hoping that it's not so bad. Yeah, it's better. It will return the serial number of the battery, which kind of useless, but it's kind of neat. It shows me that it's a 98%. It is a 90 milliamp hour battery. I think that's what it's rated as, is 90 or 95. That's fine. And you're seeing that at the last full capacity charge, it was reporting at 88, which is 98%. Now, the number of batteries in that machine is 1, and then here's all of the details. Now, I can then monitor this through Uncentral as a custom service and say, if that number goes below 50 or 60 or whatever, in my personal preference, I would probably do like 65, 70%. I think the default is 68, but my preference would be like 65, 70. When the battery goes below that 70, it means that the battery is no longer able to hold a decent charge and will degrade very rapidly. Once the battery reaches about half their life, they tend to die like incredibly fast. It is because of the way that the BMS inside the battery systems are built and how they manage the charge and how they manage their cutoff point. There's a point where it's, you know what, you don't have enough charge anymore, screw you, and they just die. And that happens very rapidly on degrading batteries. So if you are a Dell shop or whatever shop, to be honest, that works. This is a Asus laptop. That's an ROG Strix. And it does that, and it returns that health either way. It does for absolutely anything, any device that reports a battery, and it compares the rated milliwatt hour to the full capacity of the last charge. So this is not what it is right now. I could be at half capacity, and that would still report the last full charge of that battery and its health. So this is in the cookbook. You can already grab it. I don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's already there for you. Go grab it. You'll notice. Oh, where'd it go? Wrong screen. All right. What I was going to say is you have a Uncentral version and an RMM version. Just make sure to grab the Uncentral one. We do this because the Enable RMM platform works differently than Uncentral, and there's some things that you cannot do in one that you can do in the other. So we tend to build that differently. So that's just something to keep in mind. You can grab whichever one you need from there. And that applies to a lot of new things that we build. It tends to show Uncentral and so here versus RMM. So just Daniel is asking us, is there a way to use automation to copy an existing user profile in AD to set up a new user? In AD itself, isn't there Active Directory? No, that one. Isn't there a duplicate? I thought there would be. I thought there was. Or create from a template. Hold on. I thought there was. I'm a little confused at this second. Create user. Thought there was. There is not. No, at the moment, sadly, I do not. I thought there was, but there is not. So Daniel, we would have to build that. Or I know there's a lot of PowerShell script that already exist for that exact purpose. What they typically do is they do a copy of the user, and then they reset a few settings. I've seen a few out there. I don't have one handy, but I've seen a few. So I would probably recommend Googling it, downloading one, using it within automation would be your best bet. But I do not personally have one at the moment handy for that purpose. Next one is from Greg. He's saying, is there any plans to improve the reboot prompt object, specifically having an option to change the font of your device requires a restart? Actually, okay, when I was reading the question as a reboot prompt, I was expecting you to ask completely something else, but that's actually very interesting. So when you get the reboot prompt, okay, you cannot change the title and stuff. I see what you mean. Honestly, I did not expect that. I do not have a good answer. I don't know of any plans to do so, but I will take a note. I will ask Chris and see if they have any plans to do so. I know short term right now, I don't think there is, because I would usually be aware of that. I have asked for changes to the behavior of the object, but I was not expecting a question around the font. So I'll look into that for you, sure.